The morning sun cast long shadows across the oil-stained concrete of Mitchell's Auto Repair in Detroit, Michigan. The shop sat on the corner of Gratiot Avenue and Harper, a neighborhood that had seen better days but still hummed with the determined energy of working-class America. The building itself was a relic from the 1960s, with faded red brick walls and large bay doors that rolled up with a metallic groan every morning at 7 sharp. Jake Mitchell stood in the main garage bay, wiping his hands on a rag that had long ago lost any capacity to actually clean anything. At 42, he'd been running this shop for nearly 20 years, taking over from his father, who'd built the business from nothing. The walls were decorated with vintage motor oil signs, faded calendars from parts suppliers, and photographs of classic American muscle cars. The smell of motor oil, brake fluid, and coffee from the ancient Mr. Coffee machine in the corner office created a familiar perfume that Jake had breathed his entire adult life. "Boss, your 9 o'clock is here," called out Tommy Rodriguez, Jake's lead mechanic for the past 8 years. Tommy was bent over the open hood of a 2015 Ford F-150, his tattooed arms elbow-deep in the engine compartment. He didn't look up, but jerked his head toward the front office, where a figure stood silhouetted against the morning light streaming through the glass door. Jake tossed the rag onto his workbench and headed toward the office, his steel-toed boots leaving prints in the thin layer of dust that perpetually covered the floor despite their best efforts. He was expecting someone named Alex Chen, a candidate for the open mechanic position. They'd been short-staffed since Marcus left for a dealership job in the suburbs 3 weeks ago, and the work was piling up. 5 cars sat in various states of disassembly, and the appointment book was full for the next 2 weeks. When Jake pushed through the office door, he stopped short. Standing beside the scarred wooden desk was a woman, maybe 28 or 30, with her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore work boots, dark blue Dickies pants, and a grey t-shirt under an open flannel shirt. Her handshake, when she extended it, was firm and confident. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm Alex Chen. Thanks for seeing me." Jake blinked, recovering from his surprise. "Right, Alex. I wasn't expecting—" He trailed off, realizing how that sounded. "A woman?" Alex finished for him, her expression neutral but her dark eyes sharp and assessing. "Yeah, I get that a lot. My resume's pretty clear about my qualifications, though." Jake felt heat creep up his neck. He gestured to the plastic chair across from his desk and took his own seat, pulling up her resume on his coffee-stained monitor. The credentials were impressive. Associate degree in automotive technology from Wayne County Community College, ASE Master Technician certification, 5 years at a shop in Ann Arbor before it closed down last month. "Your resume looks good on paper," Jake said, leaning back in his chair, which squeaked in protest. "But this is a different kind of shop than what you're probably used to. We do a lot of heavy work, transmissions, engine rebuilds, not just oil changes and brake jobs." Alex's jaw tightened slightly, but her voice remained steady. "Mr. Mitchell, I've rebuilt over 50 engines in the past 3 years. I can handle a torque wrench, read a service manual, and diagnose problems most mechanics would miss. My last shop closed because the owner retired, not because of my work. I have references." Through the office window, Jake could see Tommy and the other 2 mechanics, Danny and Russ, pretending not to watch the interview while obviously watching the interview. This shop had been all male for its entire existence. His father had always said that mechanic work was man's work, that women didn't have the strength or the stomach for it. Jake had grown up with those beliefs as solidly as the concrete floor beneath his feet. "Look," Jake said, trying to find a diplomatic way to phrase his concerns, "it's not that I don't think you're capable, but the guys here, they're used to working a certain way. This is a rough environment. There's heavy lifting, tight spaces, and honestly, the language can get pretty colorful. I'm not sure you'd fit in with the culture here." Alex stood up abruptly, and for a moment Jake thought she was going to storm out. Instead, she placed both hands on his desk and leaned forward, her expression intense but controlled. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm going to be straight with you. I need this job. I've got rent to pay and student loans breathing down my neck, but more than that, I'm good at what I do, really good. I'm not asking for special treatment or a softer environment. I'm asking for a chance to prove myself based on my skills, not your assumptions about what I can or can't handle." The office fell silent, except for the tick of the wall clock and the distant sound of an impact wrench from the garage. Jake looked at the resume again, then at Alex's determined face. Part of him wanted to end the interview right there, to stick with what was comfortable and familiar. But another part of him, maybe the part that remembered struggling to be taken seriously when he first took over from his father, recognized something in her eyes. "Tell you what," Jake said slowly, "we've got a 2008 Dodge Charger out there that's been giving us fits. Engine's missing. Losing power, check engine lights on. Tommy's spent 2 days on it and can't figure it out. You diagnose it correctly, and we'll talk about a trial period." Alex's eyes narrowed. "And if I can't diagnose it in whatever arbitrary time frame you're thinking, then you're probably not qualified for this position," Jake said, immediately regretting how dismissive it sounded. For a long moment, Alex stared at him, and Jake could see the internal debate playing across her face. Then she nodded curtly. "Fine. Show me the car." Jake led her out into the garage bay where the black Charger sat with its hood already open. Tommy straightened up from the truck he'd been working on, wiping his hands and watching with undisguised curiosity. Danny, a barrel-chested man in his 50s, and Russ, barely out of trade school, both stopped what they were doing to observe. "Guys, this is Alex. She's going to take a look at the Charger," Jake announced, noting the glances exchanged between his crew. Alex didn't acknowledge them. She walked directly to the Charger, studied the engine bay for a moment, then looked back at Jake. "Can I start it up?" "Be my guest." She slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine caught, rumbled unevenly, and Jake could hear the miss immediately. Alex let it run for about 30 seconds, her head tilted as she listened, then shut it off. She got out, pulled her phone from her pocket, and turned on its flashlight. For the next 20 minutes, she worked in focused silence. She checked vacuum lines, inspected the ignition coils, examined the air intake. She pulled the dipstick, checked the oil, and smelled it. Then she disappeared underneath the car, and Jake could hear her moving around on the creeper. When she emerged, there was a smudge of oil on her cheek, but her expression was confident. She walked over to where Tommy's diagnostic scanner sat on a cart and picked it up. "Mind if I use this?" Tommy looked at Jake, who nodded. Alex plugged the scanner into the OBD2 port and scrolled through the codes for a few minutes. Then she unplugged it, set it back on the cart, and turned to face Jake. "Your problem isn't what you think it is. Yeah, you've got a misfire on cylinder 3, but that's a symptom, not the cause. You've got a small vacuum leak at the brake booster hose connection. It's pulling in unmetered air, throwing off the fuel mixture. The engine computer is trying to compensate, but it can't quite manage it, especially under load. Replace the hose and the connection point, and your misfire will disappear." Tommy's eyebrows shot up. "I checked the vacuum lines." "Did you check with the engine under load or just at idle?" Alex asked, her tone professional, not challenging. "The leak's small enough that it doesn't show up at idle, but when you're driving and the brake booster's pulling vacuum, it opens up." Jake felt a flicker of grudging respect. "That's specific. You sure?" "I heard the hiss when I was underneath. It's faint, but it's there. Check it yourself if you don't believe me." Jake grabbed a mechanic's stethoscope from the tool bench and spent 5 minutes listening to various parts of the engine. When he got to the brake booster hose, he heard it, a tiny whistle of air that he'd completely missed. He straightened up, aware that his crew was watching him closely. "Huh, Okay, that's good diagnostic work. Alex crossed her arms. So, do I get the trial period? Jake opened his mouth, but before he could answer, Danny spoke up from across the garage. Boss, you really gonna hire a girl? This ain't a place for... Danny. Jake cut him off sharply, surprising himself. He looked at Alex, who stood there waiting, her chin slightly raised, refusing to show any weakness. He thought about his daughter, Emma, who was in college, studying engineering. He thought about all the times he'd told her she could be anything she wanted to be, do anything she set her mind to. But this was different, wasn't it? This was his shop, his crew, his way of doing things. Wasn't it? Look, Alex, Jake started, and saw her shoulders stiffen as if preparing for rejection. You clearly know your stuff. But this is a small operation, and team chemistry matters. The guys and I, we've got a rhythm, a way of working together. I'm just not sure. He paused, searching for words that wouldn't make him sound like a complete jerk. I'm not sure you're the right fit for what we do here. You're skilled, no question, but I don't think you're qualified for this particular position. It's not personal. The words hung in the air like the exhaust fumes that perpetually hazed the garage. Alex's expression didn't change, but something shuddered behind her eyes, a light going out that Jake immediately wished he could reignite. Right, she said quietly. Not personal, just the same BS I've heard at every shop that wouldn't even let me turn a wrench. She pulled her phone from her pocket and tapped at it. That's your loss, Mr. Mitchell. You've got my number if you change your mind, but I won't be holding my breath. She walked toward the door, her boots echoing on the concrete, and Jake felt an uncomfortable tightness in his chest. Just before she reached the exit, she turned back. For what it's worth, that Charger diagnosis, it would have saved your customer about $600 and a week of downtime. But hey, at least your team chemistry's intact. The door closed behind her with a definitive click. The garage fell silent, except for the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant traffic on Glacier Avenue. Well, Tommy said after a long moment, that was awkward. Jake turned back to his office without responding, but he couldn't shake the image of Alex's expression or the nagging feeling that he'd just made a mistake bigger than any misdiagnosis he'd ever made in his career. The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine work, but Jake found his mind wandering back to the interview. By the time he locked up at 6, the November darkness already full and heavy, he still hadn't shaken the uncomfortable knot in his stomach that told him he'd compromised something important, some principle he didn't even realize he held. He sat in his truck in the parking lot, the engine idling, heat blowing through the vents. Through the windshield, he could see the lights of the city. Thousands of people living their lives, fighting their battles, trying to make their way in a world that didn't always make it easy. Jake thought about calling Alex, apologizing, offering her the position. But what would the guys think? What would his father have said? He put the truck in drive and headed home, the question unanswered, the call unmade, and the opportunity slowly slipping away into the cold Detroit night. 3 weeks passed, and Jake tried to forget about Alex Chen. He hired a guy named Brad, fresh from another shop across town, who seemed capable enough on paper. But Brad called in sick twice in his first week, showed up late 3 times in his second, and when he finally did work, his diagnostic skills were mediocre at best. The work kept piling up, customers kept complaining about delays, and Jake found himself doing more of the heavy lifting than he had in years. It was a Tuesday morning in early December when everything changed. Jake was under a Honda Accord, wrestling with a stubborn exhaust pipe, when he heard Tommy's voice from across the garage. "Hey boss, you might want to see this." Jake rolled out from under the car, his back protesting, and walked over to where Tommy stood at the computer terminal they used for the shop's social media. Danny and Russ had gathered around as well, and even Brad had looked up from his phone for once. On the screen was a video that was clearly going viral. based on the view count climbing in real time. The title read, "I told her you're not qualified. Then she rebuilt my engine blindfolded." Jake's stomach dropped. The video opened with Alex Chen standing in what looked like a different auto shop, though Jake didn't recognize it. She was speaking directly to the camera, her expression calm but determined. "A few weeks ago, I interviewed at a shop here in Detroit. I correctly diagnosed a problem their lead mechanic had been working on for 2 days. The owner told me I wasn't qualified, not because of my skills, but because I didn't fit his idea of what a mechanic should look like." Jake felt every eye in the garage turn toward him. His face burned. "So, I want to issue a challenge," Alex continued in the video, "to Jake Mitchell of Mitchell's Auto Repair and to anyone else who thinks gender determines competence. I'll rebuild an engine blindfolded. If I can do it, will you finally admit that qualifications matter more than prejudice?" The video cut to a new scene. Alex stood beside an engine block on a stand, various tools laid out on a table beside her. Another person, a woman Jake didn't recognize, tied a thick black blindfold over Alex's eyes, checking it carefully to ensure she couldn't see. What followed was 45 minutes condensed into a gripping 10-minute time-lapse. Alex's hands moved with practiced precision, disassembling the engine piece by piece, organizing components by touch, and then methodically rebuilding it. She felt for bolt holes, tested torque by muscle memory, assembled the cylinder head and valve train without seeing any of it. When she was done, the blindfold came off. Alex started the engine, and it purred smoothly, no knocking, no missing, just clean, even power. The video had been viewed over 2 million times in less than 24 hours. "Well," Danny said into the silence, "that's something." Jake's phone started ringing, then it rang again and again. Within an hour, he'd gotten calls from 3 reporters. 2 local news stations, and more customers than he could count, some cancelling appointments, others calling to support him, still others just wanting to know what he was going to do about that girl mechanic who showed you up. By noon, there was a TV news van parked outside the shop. Jake refused to give an interview, but that didn't stop them from filming the exterior and talking to people on the street. Tommy found Jake in the office, staring at his computer screen where the video had been replayed for the 4th time. "You gotta admit," Tommy said carefully, "that was pretty impressive." "She made me look like a fool," Jake said flatly. "No, boss, you made yourself look like a fool." She just pointed it out. Jake looked up sharply, but Tommy's expression wasn't antagonistic, just honest. "You really think I was wrong?" Tommy pulled up a chair and sat down heavily. "Look, man, I've worked for you for 8 years. You're a good boss, fair, you pay on time, you care about quality work. But yeah, you were wrong about her. She walked in here with all the right credentials, proved herself on the spot, and you still said no because she's a woman. What else was she supposed to think?" "The team dynamics." "Are we 12 years old?" Tommy interrupted. "We're professional mechanics, Jake. We can work with anyone who knows their stuff. Hell, half the technicians at the dealerships now are women. The world's changing, and we're getting left behind." Before Jake could respond, his phone rang again. This time it was a number he recognized, his daughter Emma calling from her college dorm. "Dad, I just saw the video," Emma said without preamble. "Tell me you're not that person. Tell me you didn't actually reject someone qualified because she's a woman." Jake rubbed his temples. "Emma, it's more complicated than—" "It's really not, Dad. You're the one who always told me I could be anything I wanted. You're the one who said skills and hard work matter more than anything else. Was that all just talk?" The disappointment in his daughter's voice cut deeper than any of the online criticism. "No, honey, it wasn't just talk. Then fix this. Make it right." After she hung up, Jake sat in silence. The sounds of the garage muffled through the office door. He thought about his father, about the way things had always been done. But he also thought about Emma, about the world she was growing up in, and about whether he wanted to be part of the problem or part of the solution. He picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found Alex's number. His thumb hovered over the call button for a long moment. Then he made the call. It rang 4 times before she answered. "This is Alex." "Alex, it's Jake Mitchell." A long pause. "I know. What do you want?" "I saw the video." "And? You calling to threaten me with a lawsuit or something?" "No," Jake said, surprised by the question. "No, I'm calling to say you were right. And I was wrong." Another pause, longer this time. "I'm listening. I let my assumptions and my old-fashioned thinking get in the way of making a good business decision. You were qualified. You are qualified. And I turned you away because I was more worried about what I thought my crew would think than about doing the right thing." "That's a pretty admission, Mr. Mitchell. But what are you going to do about it?" Jake took a breath. "I want to issue a counter-challenge. You come work here for 1 month. Full pay. Full benefits. You do the same work as everyone else. No special treatment. At the end of the month, if the crew votes that you're not pulling your weight or not a good fit, you walk away, no hard feelings. But if they vote that you earned your place, you get a permanent position and a public apology from me. And if I say no, then I guess I deserve everything that's being said about me online." He could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, could almost feel her weighing the options. "One condition," she finally said. "When I prove myself, and I will prove myself, you also make a donation to Women in Automotive Scholarship Fund, $5,000. Jake winced. That was a lot of money for a small shop, but he found himself saying, "Deal." "Then I'll see you Monday morning, Mr. Mitchell, 7 a.m. sharp." She hung up before he could respond. Jake sat there, phone in hand, wondering if he'd just made things better or infinitely worse. When he walked out into the garage to tell the crew, Danny was the first to speak up. "Boss, you sure about this? Bringing her in after she embarrassed us online?" "She embarrassed me, Danny, and I had it coming." Jake looked around at his team. "Look, I'm asking you guys to give her a fair shot. 1 month. After that, you vote on whether she stays. If you can honestly say she's not good enough, she goes. But the vote has to be based on her work, not anything else. Can you do that?" Tommy nodded immediately. Russ looked uncertain but didn't object. Danny crossed his arms, his expression skeptical, but finally gave a reluctant shrug. 1 month, Danny agreed. "But she's got to prove herself like anyone else would." "That's all I'm asking," Jake said. That weekend, Jake couldn't stop thinking about Monday. He watched the video again, paying attention this time not to his own embarrassment, but to Alex's skill. The way her hands moved, confident and precise. The muscle memory that let her identify parts by touch alone. The deep understanding of how an engine fit together that went beyond just mechanical knowledge. He called Emma back and told her what he'd done. She was cautiously optimistic. "Don't screw this up, Dad. This is your chance to show that you meant all those things you taught me." Sunday night, Jake barely slept. He arrived at the shop at 6 a.m. an hour early and spent the time cleaning up the garage, organizing tools, and trying to calm the nervous energy that thrummed through his body. At 6:55, a familiar car pulled into the lot. Alex Chen got out, carrying a large red toolbox that looked like it had seen years of hard use. She wore the same practical work clothes as before, her hair pulled back, and her expression was all business. Jake met her at the entrance. "Morning, morning," she replied, her tone neutral. "Listen, before we start, I want to say again that I'm sorry. What I did was wrong, and I'm going to do my best to make sure nothing like that happens here again." Alex studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Apology noted. Now, can we get to work? I've got something to prove." Tommy arrived next, then Russ, and finally Danny, who gave Alex a long look but said nothing. Brad showed up 20 minutes late, as usual, and Jake made a mental note to deal with that problem soon. "All right," Jake said, gathering everyone around. "Alex is joining us for a trial month. She's going to do the same work as everyone else, and at the end of the month we'll evaluate how things went. I expect everyone to be professional and give her a fair chance. Any questions?" Silence. Then Tommy stepped forward and extended his hand to Alex. "Welcome to the team. I'm Tommy, lead mechanic. You need anything, let me know." Alex shook his hand, and Jake saw some of the tension leave her shoulders. Maybe, just maybe, this could work. The first test came within an hour. A customer's Jeep Grand Cherokee had just been towed in with a no-start condition. Jake assigned it to Alex. "Let's see what you can do," he said, and immediately regretted how it sounded like a challenge rather than an assignment. But Alex just nodded, grabbed her diagnostic tools, and got to work. Within 30 minutes, she'd identified a failed crankshaft position sensor and had the part ordered for overnight delivery. Clean, efficient, professional. By lunchtime, she'd also done an oil change on a Toyota Camry, replaced brake pads on a Ford Explorer, and diagnosed a cooling system leak on a Chevrolet Silverado. She worked without fanfare, without seeking approval, just putting her head down and doing the job. Jake caught himself watching her throughout the day, not to find fault, but with growing respect for her methodical approach and obvious competence. She didn't waste motion, didn't second-guess herself, and didn't complain about any of the tasks assigned to her. At the end of the day, as everyone was cleaning up, Danny approached Jake in the office. "She's good," he admitted grudgingly. "I mean, it's only day one, but she's good." "Yeah," Jake agreed. "Yeah, she is." That night, Jake drove home feeling lighter than he had in weeks. Maybe this could work. Maybe he'd actually done the right thing. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When he opened it, he saw it was from Alex. "Thanks for the chance. I won't let you down." Jake smiled and typed back, "Thanks for taking it. See you tomorrow." As he pulled into his driveway, he realized that for the first time since that disastrous interview, he was actually looking forward to going to work in the morning. Not because he expected drama or conflict, but because he was curious to see what Alex would do next, and because he was finally doing something that aligned with the values he'd always claimed to hold. Change was uncomfortable, change was hard. But maybe, Jake thought as he unlocked his front door, change was exactly what Mitchell's auto repair needed. The first week was a careful dance of professional courtesy and subtle testing. Alex showed up every morning 15 minutes early, her red toolbox in hand, ready to tackle whatever Jake assigned her. She never complained, never asked for easier jobs, and never made excuses when something took longer than expected. Tommy became her unofficial mentor, showing her where tools were kept, explaining the shop's specific procedures, and introducing her to regular customers. He had an easygoing demeanor that helped break the ice, and Jake noticed that by Wednesday, he and Alex were trading diagnostic theories and sharing war stories from their respective previous jobs like old colleagues. Russ, the youngest of the crew at 23, was curious and eager to learn. Jake caught him watching Alex work on a transmission rebuild, asking questions about her technique. She answered patiently, explaining her reasoning as she went, even demonstrating a trick for removing stubborn bolts that Russ immediately tried himself. Danny was the holdout. He wasn't overtly hostile, but he maintained a professional distance, speaking to Alex only when necessary and never quite making eye contact. Jake understood it, even if he didn't condone it. Danny was old school, set in his ways, and change made him uncomfortable. Brad, meanwhile, continued to be a problem entirely unrelated to Alex. He showed up late, worked slowly, and spent more time on his phone than under hoods. By Friday of that first week, Jake knew he'd have to address it soon. The real test came the following Monday. Mrs. Patricia Morrison, one of their oldest and most particular customers, brought in her 1987 Buick LeSabre. The car had been her late husband's pride and joy, and she kept it running as a tribute to him. It needed a complete brake system overhaul, front and rear, including new lines, calipers, rotors, and drums. "I want your best person on this," Mrs. Morrison told Jake firmly. She was 76, sharp as a tack, and didn't tolerate excuses. "Harold loved this car, and I won't have it treated like some junker." Jake glanced across the garage. Tommy was up to his elbows in an engine rebuild. Danny was dealing with a complicated electrical issue on a Mercedes. Russ was still learning. Brad was somewhere, probably on his phone. That left Alex, who was just finishing up a routine service. "Alex," Jake called out, "can you come here for a minute?" She wiped her hands and walked over. Jake introduced her to Mrs. Morrison and explained the job. "Mrs. Morrison, Alex is going to handle your brake system. She's one of our most skilled technicians, and she'll treat your husband's car with the respect it deserves." Mrs. Morrison looked Alex up and down, her expression skeptical. "You know your way around classic cars, young lady." "I do, ma'am," Alex replied respectfully. "I restored a 1969 Mustang with my father when I was in high school. I understand how important it is to preserve the integrity of the original systems while making sure everything's safe and functional." Mrs. Morrison's expression softened slightly. "What color was the Mustang?" "Acapulco blue with white racing stripes." A smile ghosted across the older woman's face. "Harold always said that was the prettiest Mustang color ever made." She looked at Jake. "All right, she can work on my car, but I'll be back to check on the progress." As Mrs. Morrison left, Danny walked past and muttered just loud enough for Jake to hear, "Hope you know what you're doing, boss." Jake felt a flicker of doubt, but pushed it aside. He'd assigned the job based on skill and availability, which was exactly what he should do. Over the next 3 days, Alex methodically worked through the Buick's brake system. She documented everything with photos, showed Jake each worn component, and explained her recommendations. She sourced period-correct parts where possible and made sure that every replacement was done precisely to specification. On Wednesday afternoon, Mrs. Morrison returned. Alex met her at the door, still wearing her work gloves, and walked her through everything she'd done. She showed her the old parts, explained why each replacement was necessary, and even demonstrated the improved braking action by pressing the pedal with the car on stands. "The brake lines were the real concern," Alex explained, pointing to the corroded old lines laid out on a clean shop towel. "They had developed internal rust that was restricting fluid flow. You would have eventually had a complete brake failure. Everything's been replaced now, and I've adjusted the drums to factory specifications. The car will stop like it did when your husband first drove it." Mrs. Morrison examined the old parts, then looked at the car on the lift, then back at Alex. "You did all this yourself?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you're confident it's safe?" "I'd let my own mother drive it, Mrs. Morrison. In fact, if you'd like, I can take you for a test drive when we bring it down, show you how it handles." 20 minutes later, Jake watched through the front window as Alex drove Mrs. Morrison around the block in the Buick. When they returned, the older woman was smiling, and when she came in to pay her bill, she specifically asked Jake to make sure Alex was the one who worked on her car from now on. "That young woman knows her business," Mrs. Morrison declared, loud enough for the whole shop to hear. "And she's got the patience to explain things in a way I can understand. You're lucky to have her." After she left, Danny approached Alex at her workstation. Jake couldn't hear the conversation from across the garage, but he saw Danny extend his hand, saw Alex shake it, and saw something that looked like respect pass between them. That night, Jake texted Emma to tell her how the week had gone. She texted back, "Told you. Sometimes the right thing is also the smart thing." The following week brought new challenges. A local high school automotive program teacher called to ask if they could bring a group of students for a field trip to see a working shop in action. Jake agreed and scheduled it for Thursday afternoon. When the students arrived, 15 teenagers of various backgrounds and genders, they gathered in the garage bay to watch the mechanics work. Jake gave a brief introduction, then invited questions. One girl, maybe 16, raised her hand. "Are there any women mechanics here?" Before Jake could answer, Alex rolled out from under a Honda Civic she'd been working on. "That would be me," she said, standing up and pulling off her work gloves. The girl's face lit up. "Really? That's so cool. How did you get into this?" What followed was an impromptu Q&A session that lasted 20 minutes. Alex talked about her training, her experiences, the challenges she'd faced, and why she loved the work. Several girls in the group took notes, asking detailed questions about education requirements and career paths. The automotive teacher, Mr. Harris, approached Jake afterward. "That was fantastic. We've got several girls in the program who get discouraged because they don't see many women in the field. Having Alex here, seeing her as a successful professional, that means something." As the students were leaving, the girl who'd asked the first question stopped at Alex's workstation. "Thanks for talking to us. My dad says girls can't be mechanics, but seeing you, I think I'm going to prove him wrong." Alex smiled. "That's exactly what I said to my dad once. Now he tells everyone that I'm a better mechanic than he ever was. Prove them wrong, but do it by being so good at what you do that they can't deny it." Jake felt something shift in his chest, a recognition that his decision to give Alex a chance had ripple effects beyond just his shop, beyond just his business. He was helping to change someone's mind about what was possible, just like that teenage girl was going to go home and challenge her father's assumptions. That weekend, Jake took Emma out to dinner during her brief trip home from college. Over burgers at their favorite diner, she asked how things were really going with Alex. "Better than I expected," Jake admitted. "She's skilled, she's reliable, and she's actually been good for the team. Tommy works better when he's teaching someone, and even Danny's coming around. Russ basically worships her at this point." "And the customers?" "Most of them don't care as long as their car gets fixed right. And the ones who do care have been won over pretty quick when they see her work." He paused, stirring his coffee. "I've been thinking about that video she made, the one that went viral. I was so angry at first, felt like she was attacking me personally." "She was calling out your behavior, Dad, not attacking you." "I know that now, and honestly, I'm glad she did it. If she hadn't made that video, I wouldn't have had to confront my own biases. I would have just gone on believing that I wasn't prejudiced, that I was making reasonable business decisions, when really I was just perpetuating the same old exclusionary patterns." Emma reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I'm proud of you, Dad. Changing your mind is hard, especially when you've believed something for a long time." "I learned from the best," Jake said, smiling at his daughter. "You've never been afraid to call me out when I'm wrong." The third week brought an unexpected challenge. Brad finally pushed Jake's patience too far by showing up 2 hours late on a Monday with no explanation and an attitude when Jake confronted him. Jake fired him on the spot, which left the shop short-handed just as they entered their busiest season before the holidays. "We're going to have to bust our butts to keep up with the schedule," Jake told the remaining crew. "I'm going to jump back in full-time on repairs until we can hire someone else." What followed was 10 days of intense work. Everyone put in long hours, tackling jobs back-to-back with barely a break. Jake was reminded why he'd moved more into management, his 42-year-old back protesting the constant bending and lifting. But there was also something satisfying about working alongside his crew, all of them united in the common goal of keeping the shop running. Alex never complained, never flagged, even when Jake assigned her the toughest jobs. She tackled a seized engine replacement on a Jeep, rebuilt a transmission for a delivery van, and diagnosed an intermittent electrical problem that had stumped everyone else. Late one evening, after everyone else had gone home, Jake found Alex still in the shop, finishing up paperwork on a particularly complicated job. "You know you can go home, right?" Jake said. "We don't pay overtime." "I know. I just wanted to make sure all the documentation was complete for the customer tomorrow morning." She closed the work order and looked up at him. "Thanks, by the way." "For what?" "For giving me a chance, for being willing to change your mind, for judging me on my work instead of your assumptions." She paused. "I know it wasn't easy." Jake pulled up a stool and sat down. "Can I ask you something? That video, the blindfolded engine rebuild, how much practice did that take?" Alex smiled. "About 100 hours. I rebuilt the same engine over and over until I could do it by touch alone. My friend Maria, she's the one who filmed it. She kept telling me I was crazy, but I needed to prove a point. Not just to you, but to every shop owner like you who'd turned me away without giving me a real shot." "Was it worth it?" "Ask me at the end of the month," Alex said, "when we find out if your crew votes to keep me." "For what it's worth," Jake said, "I think I already know how that vote's going to go." As December progressed, the shop settled into a new rhythm. Customers stopped commenting on Alex being the only woman mechanic, treating her the same as they treated Tommy or Danny or Russ. The crew worked together smoothly, with Alex fully integrated into their informal routines and inside jokes. The 1-month mark fell on a Friday. Jake called everyone together at the end of the day, gathered around the front office. His stomach was tense with an anxiety he tried to hide. This mattered more than he'd expected it to. "All right," Jake said. "It's been a month since Alex joined us on a trial basis. As agreed, it's time for the crew to vote on whether she becomes a permanent member of the team. The vote has to be based solely on her work, her skills, and whether she's a good fit for the shop." Everyone understand. Nods all around. Alex stood slightly apart, her expression neutral, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. "We'll do this by secret ballot," Jake continued, handing out slips of paper. "Write yes if you think Alex has earned a permanent position. No if you think she should go. Put your vote in this toolbox, and I'll count them." The scratching of pens on paper seemed unnaturally loud. One by one, the folded slips went into the toolbox. When everyone was done, Jake pulled them out. He opened the first. Yes. The second, yes. The third, yes. He looked up at Danny, who shrugged. "She's a good mechanic, better than Brad ever was. I'd be stupid to vote no just because she's a woman." Jake opened the last ballot. "Yes, it's unanimous," he said, and saw Alex's shoulders finally relax. "Welcome to the permanent team, Alex." Tommy started clapping and Russ joined in, and even Danny cracked a smile. Alex ducked her head, but not before Jake saw the emotion flash across her face. "Thank you," she said quietly. "All of you. I won't let you down." "You already haven't," Tommy said. "Now can we please hire someone else so we can stop working these crazy hours?" Everyone laughed, and the tension broke. As they dispersed to finish cleaning up, Jake motioned for Alex to follow him to the office. "So," he said, pulling out his business checkbook, "I believe I owe a donation to the Women in Automotive Scholarship Fund." He wrote the check for $5,000 and handed it to Alex. "I'll mail this tomorrow. And Alex, I'm going to make another one, same amount every year. It's not just about making up for my mistake, it's about trying to fix the bigger problem." Alex looked at the check, then at Jake. "You know you're going to get pushback, right? There are going to be people who think you're being too politically correct, that you caved to social media pressure. Let them think what they want," Jake said. "I know what happened here. I let my prejudices make my decisions instead of using my brain. And when you called me out on it, instead of getting defensive, I should have listened from the start. Better late than never, I guess." "Better late than never," Alex agreed. That night, Jake posted a video to the shop's social media accounts. In it, he sat at his desk and spoke directly to the camera. "A month ago, A video went viral showing a talented mechanic named Alex Chen rebuilding an engine blindfolded. That video came about because I told Alex she wasn't qualified to work at my shop. I was wrong. Not just wrong about Alex, but wrong about my assumptions about who can and can't do this job. Today, after a month of working here, my entire crew voted unanimously to make Alex a permanent member of our team. She's earned it through skill, hard work, and professionalism. But more than that, she's made us all better by challenging our assumptions and showing us that talent doesn't have a gender. I'm making a public apology to Alex and to everyone else I might have discouraged or turned away because of outdated thinking. Mitchell's Auto Repair is committed to hiring and promoting based on merit, period. And I'm putting my money where my mouth is with a $5,000 donation to women in automotive and a commitment to do the same every year going forward. Change is uncomfortable. Admitting you were wrong is hard, but it's necessary if we want to be better. Thank you, Alex, for not letting me off the hook, and thank you for giving us a chance to prove we could do better. The video didn't go as viral as Alex's had, but it got seen by everyone who mattered. Customers commented positively, industry colleagues reached out with support, and by Monday morning, Jake had 3 applications from qualified female mechanics in the area looking for work. As December rolled toward the holidays, Jake found himself reflecting on how much had changed in such a short time. His shop was busier than ever, his crew was stronger, and he'd learned something important about himself, about his values, and about the courage it takes to admit when you're wrong. On Christmas Eve, the shop closed early. As everyone was heading out, Alex stopped at Jake's office door. "Merry Christmas, boss." "Merry Christmas, Alex. Got big plans. Heading to my parents' place. My dad wants me to look at his truck. Apparently there's a noise he can't figure out." Jake laughed. "The work never ends, does it?" "Would we want it to?" Alex smiled. "See you after the holidays." As she left, Jake thought about the journey they'd all taken over the past 2 months. From prejudice to partnership, from assumption to acceptance, from comfortable ignorance to uncomfortable growth. He thought about that teenage girl who'd visited with her automotive class, inspired by seeing Alex succeed in a male-dominated field. He thought about his own daughter, and the world she was inheriting, hopefully a little better than the one he'd grown up in. Jake locked up the shop and headed home through the light snow that had started falling, the streetlights casting halos in the cold December air. Change was hard, yes, but change was also necessary, inevitable, and sometimes, if you were lucky, it made everything better. The new year brought changes that rippled far beyond Mitchell's Auto Repair. Jake's public apology video had resonated with more people than he'd expected, and by mid-January he'd been invited to speak at a local automotive trade school about diversity in the industry. He almost declined, feeling like a fraud, but Alex encouraged him. "You made a mistake and owned it," she told him over coffee during a rare slow afternoon. "That's more than most people do. If talking about it helps someone else avoid making the same mistake, that's worth something." So Jake found himself standing in front of a classroom of 30 students, about a third of them women, talking about how his assumptions had nearly cost him one of his best employees. "I thought I was being pragmatic," he told the class. "I told myself it was about team dynamics, about physical requirements, about maintaining the culture of my shop. But really, I was just scared. Scared of change, scared of being uncomfortable. Scared of admitting that the way things had always been done wasn't necessarily the right way." A young woman in the front row raised her hand. "What made you finally change your mind?" Jake thought about that for a moment. "Honestly, my daughter. She asked me if everything I'd taught her about merit and hard work was just talk. And I realized that if I turned Alex away, I was telling my daughter that I didn't really believe women could compete in this field, no matter what I'd said over the years. I couldn't live with that hypocrisy." After the talk, several students approached him with questions. Two young women asked if Mitchell's might have internship positions available. Jake took their names and told them to apply, making a mental note to actually create an internship program if qualified students were interested. Back at the shop, business was booming. Word had spread about their turnaround story, and new customers were coming in specifically asking for Alex. Some were women who'd never felt comfortable at auto repair shops before. Others were parents teaching their daughters that any career path was open to them. And some were just people who appreciated good work and the integrity to admit mistakes. Tommy had taken on more of a leadership role, mentoring both Alex and Russ in advanced diagnostic techniques. Danny, who Jake had worried might hold a grudge, had instead become one of Alex's strongest advocates, telling customers about her skills with a pride that suggested he'd forgotten he'd ever doubted her. In February, they hired a new mechanic, a 25-year-old woman named Sarah Rodriguez, who'd recently completed her ASE certifications. Having two women on the team normalized it in a way that having just Alex never could have. The shop was no longer the place that hired that viral video woman, but simply a good auto repair shop with a diverse, skilled team. One Friday afternoon in early March, Jake was in his office doing payroll when Alex knocked on the doorframe. "Got a minute, boss?" "Sure, what's up?" Alex sat down, looking slightly nervous. "I've been offered another job. Shop in Ann Arbor, closer to where I grew up. More money, newer facility, the works." Jake felt his stomach drop, but forced himself to remain calm. "That sounds like a good opportunity." "It is," Alex agreed. "But I wanted to talk to you before I made any decisions. This place, this team, what we built here together, it means something to me. I don't want to leave if there's a reason to stay." "What kind of reason are you looking for?" "Partnership," Alex said directly. "Not just an employee, but a stake in the business. A chance to help grow this place into something bigger. Something that really reflects the values we've been talking about." Jake leaned back in his chair, which gave its familiar squeak. The idea had never occurred to him, but once she said it, it made perfect sense. The shop was more work than he wanted to handle alone, especially as he got older. He wanted to spend more time with Emma, maybe even travel a bit. And Alex had proven she had the skills, the work ethic, and the vision to be more than just an employee. "What did you have in mind?" Over the next hour, they sketched out a plan. Alex would buy in as a 20% partner initially, with an option to increase her stake over time. She'd take over management of the day-to-day operations, freeing Jake to focus on business development and customer relationships. They'd formalize the internship program, maybe even start a mentorship initiative for young women in automotive careers. "I'll need to run the numbers, talk to my accountant," Jake said. "But in principle, I like this idea. I like it a lot." "One more thing," Alex added. "I want to change the name, not completely, but an addition. Mitchell's Auto Repair becomes Mitchell & Chen Auto Repair. Equal partnership, equal representation." Jake extended his hand. "Deal. Let me get the paperwork drawn up." The news that Alex was becoming a partner spread quickly through the Detroit auto repair community. Some people thought Jake was crazy, giving equity to someone who'd only worked for him for a few months. But most people who knew them both recognized it for what it was, a smart business decision and a statement of values. The shop's reputation continued to grow. They were featured in a local news segment about women in trades, and Alex was invited to speak at the same high school that had visited months earlier. The scholarship fund Jake had donated to announced they'd received a spike in applications, with several applicants mentioning Alex's story as an inspiration. In April, Sarah approached Jake and Alex with an idea. "What if we hosted a Women in Automotive open house? Invite women and girls from the community to come see the shop, ask questions, maybe even get hands-on with some basic car maintenance." They scheduled it for a Saturday in May. 40 women and girls showed up, ranging from teenage students to grandmothers who'd always wanted to understand how their cars worked, but had never felt comfortable asking. Alex, Sarah, and even Tommy and Danny led demonstrations on basic maintenance, tire changes, and how to read diagnostic codes. Jake watched from the side, seeing the excitement and curiosity on the faces of the attendees. He thought about Mrs. Morrison, who'd become one of their most loyal customers. He thought about that teenage girl from the automotive class who'd said she was going to prove her father wrong. He thought about Emma, who'd called him crying with joy when he told her about making Alex a partner. At the end of the day, as they were cleaning up, a middle-aged woman approached Jake. "I just want to thank you," she said. "My daughter is in the automotive program at her high school, and she's been facing a lot of discouragement from some of her classmates and teachers. Seeing this today, seeing women actually working as mechanics and thriving, it's going to make a huge difference for her." "Thank you for bringing her," Jake replied. "And tell her to keep at it. The industry needs people like her." After everyone left, the core team sat in the garage bay, drinking sodas and eating leftover pizza from the event. "That was pretty cool," Danny said. "Lot more interest than I expected." "People are hungry for this," Alex said. "Not just women wanting to break into the field, but everyone who's tired of the old exclusionary patterns. The world's changing, and we get to be part of that change." Tommy raised his soda can. "To Mitchell and Chen Auto Repair, may we never stop learning and growing." They all clinked cans, a toast to new beginnings and second chances. The official partnership papers were signed in June, with a small ceremony in the shop attended by Jake's family, Alex's parents, and the entire crew. Emma had driven home from college for the occasion, and Jake saw her speaking animatedly with Alex about engineering challenges and career paths. "She's going to be fine," Alex said, noticing Jake watching them. "You raised her right." "We're all going to be fine," Jake replied. "Thanks to you not letting me get away with being wrong." As summer approached, Mitchell and Chen Auto Repair was thriving. They'd hired 2 more mechanics, including a young man fresh from trade school who was eager to learn from their diverse team. The internship program had launched with 3 students, all women, who rotated through the shop learning different aspects of the business. The viral video that had started everything now had over 10 million views, and occasionally someone would recognize Alex or Jake from it. Most people were supportive, but there were always a few critics who thought political correctness had gone too far, that Jake had been bullied into hiring Alex, that he was betraying some fundamental principle by changing his mind. Jake had learned to let those criticisms roll off him. He knew what had really happened, knew the growth that had occurred, both in himself and in his business. Numbers didn't lie, customer satisfaction surveys didn't lie, and the quality of work coming out of his shop had never been better. One evening in July, as the sun was setting and casting long shadows across the garage, Jake and Alex stood in the parking lot looking at the new sign that had just been installed. "Mitchell and Chen Auto Repair," it read in bold letters, with "Serving Detroit since 1998 underneath. "Think your father would approve?" Alex asked. Jake considered that. His father had been a product of his time, with all the limitations and prejudices that implied. But he'd also been a man who believed in hard work, honesty, and taking care of customers. "I think he'd have come around, eventually, probably after grumbling about it for a while." "Sounds familiar," Alex said with a smile. They stood there in comfortable silence, 2 unlikely partners who'd found common ground through confrontation, challenge, and ultimately, mutual respect. "You ever regret making that video?" Jake asked. "I mean, there was a real risk I'd double down, refuse to hire you, maybe even cause problems for you in the industry." "Every bold move is a risk," Alex replied. "But sometimes you have to force the issue, make people uncomfortable. Demand the change you want to see. If I'd just accepted your rejection and moved on, nothing would have changed. For me or for you. I'm glad you didn't move on. Me too. The following week brought an unexpected visitor. A reporter from a major automotive industry magazine wanted to do a feature story on Mitchell and Chen, focusing on their journey from that confrontational interview to successful partnership. Jake and Alex agreed and spent an afternoon being interviewed and photographed in the shop. The article, when it came out 2 months later, was titled "The Garage That Changed Its Mind: How One Viral Video Sparked a Transformation." It was fair, honest about Jake's initial prejudice, but also highlighted the courage it took to admit being wrong and the business benefits of diverse teams. In the weeks after the article published, Jake received emails from other shop owners around the country, some asking for advice on how to recruit and retain women mechanics, others sharing their own stories of changing workplace cultures. A few were hostile, accusing him of virtue signaling or pandering, but those were increasingly rare. By autumn, Mitchell and Chen had become something of a model in the local community. They were regularly invited to career fairs, they'd established relationships with several trade schools, and their Women in Automotive events had become quarterly occurrences that drew bigger crowds each time. Alex had proven to be not just a skilled mechanic, but also a savvy business partner. She'd implemented new efficiency systems, improved their digital presence, and negotiated better deals with parts suppliers. The shop's revenue had increased by 30% since she came on board, and customer retention was at an all-time high. In November, almost exactly a year after that first difficult interview, the crew gathered for an anniversary celebration. Jake had brought in catering from a local restaurant, and the garage was decorated with photos from the past year, charting their journey together. "I want to make a toast," Jake said, raising his beer bottle. "A year ago, I made one of the biggest mistakes of my career. I let my assumptions and prejudices make a decision that should have been based purely on skill and qualifications. I'm grateful that Alex didn't let me get away with it. Grateful that she gave me a chance to learn and grow, and grateful that all of you were willing to come along on that journey. Here's to making mistakes and learning from them," Tommy added, "and to second chances, and to being stubborn enough to demand the respect you deserve," Alex said, looking around at the team that had become like family. "I couldn't ask for better partners and colleagues." They drank to that, and as the evening wore on, Jake found himself reflecting on how much had changed in just 1 year. He'd confronted his own biases, expanded his understanding of what leadership meant, and built something stronger and more resilient than what he'd had before. The shop, that had been all male for decades now, had 3 women mechanics, all of them excellent at their jobs. The culture that had been stuck in outdated patterns now embraced growth and change. The business that had been slowly declining was now thriving, attracting customers and talent from across the region. As people started heading home, Emma pulled Jake aside. She'd driven down from college for the celebration. "Dad, I'm really proud of you," she said. "Not just for changing your mind about Alex, but for being public about it, for making it mean something beyond just your shop. Your call that day, when you asked if everything I'd taught you was just talk, that was a turning point," Jake admitted. "I didn't want to be that kind of person. The kind who says one thing and does another." "You're not," Emma assured him. "You prove that." After everyone had left and Jake was locking up for the night, Alex appeared from the office carrying 2 beers. "Thought you might want one more," she said, handing him a bottle. They sat on the curb in the parking lot, looking at the Detroit skyline in the distance, the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk settled. "Can I ask you something?" Jake said. "What would you have done if I hadn't called you back? If I'd just let it end with that first interview?" Alex was quiet for a moment. "I'd have found another job eventually. Maybe not as good as this one turned out to be, but I'd have survived." But I wouldn't have had the satisfaction of knowing I changed someone's mind, that I made a real difference. That's worth more than any paycheck. You changed more than my mind, Jake said. You changed this whole shop. Probably changed some attitudes in the community. Definitely changed my daughter's belief in whether her father practices what he preaches. We changed them together, Alex corrected. I pushed, but you were willing to be pushed. That's not nothing. A lot of people double down when challenged, get defensive, refuse to examine their beliefs. You didn't do that. Eventually, Jake said with a wry smile. I definitely didn't handle it well at first. Nobody handles having their prejudices called out gracefully, Alex said. The important thing is what you do afterward. They sat there as the evening deepened, two people who'd started as adversaries and become partners, their unlikely friendship built on honesty, challenge, and mutual respect. The next morning was a regular Monday, and Mitchell and Chen Auto Repair opened its doors at 7 a.m. sharp, ready to serve customers, mentor students, and continue the work of building something meaningful. The garage bays filled with cars needing service, the diagnostic computers hummed to life, and the team moved with practiced efficiency through their tasks. And if someone had asked Jake Mitchell whether he regretted hiring Alex Chen, whether he wished he'd stuck with his initial decision, he would have laughed. Because he'd learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is admit you were wrong. That sometimes the people who challenge you the most are exactly the people you need, and that sometimes a willingness to change your mind is the greatest strength of all. The story of Mitchell and Chen Auto Repair became the story of one man's journey from prejudice to partnership, from comfortable ignorance to uncomfortable growth, from saying, "You're not qualified," to saying, "I was wrong and I'm better for it." And every time someone new walked through those doors, whether customer or potential employee, they walked into a place that had learned its lesson, that judged people by their skills and character rather than their gender or background. And that stood as proof that people could change, businesses could evolve, and that doing the right thing was always worth the effort. As winter approached again, bringing the cycle full circle, Jake sometimes thought about that November morning when Alex had first walked into his shop. He thought about how close he'd come to missing out on one of the best things that ever happened to his business. He thought about all the talented people who'd probably been turned away from opportunities because someone made assumptions about what they could or couldn't do. And he committed himself every single day to never making that mistake again, to always looking past his assumptions, to see the person in front of him, and to building a workplace where talent was recognized regardless of who possessed it. The garage door rolled open each morning with its familiar metallic groan. The coffee maker burbled to life in the office, and the team of mechanics, diverse and skilled and united by their shared passion for the work, got down to business, and that, Jake thought, was exactly how it should be. The end.